What's up, guys? Chris here from Mainely Mesh. We are done with our top string, which I will snip right now and burn. I always think it's funny how different people burn their strings differently and cut their strings differently. You would think we would all do it the same way, but we don't. So now we are on to the sidewall. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to make another loop start. I highly suggest you guys look through ustring.com that String King has made. Not necessarily for the patterns, because I think their patterns will throw amazingly well. I don't think they have quite as much channel as I would prefer, but at the same time, they are really high functioning pockets. So a lot of times I will just kind of take a peek at Ustring, see the way they've started it, just to get an idea of where to start with my own stuff. So the way I always start my sidewalls is by I like to loop around the sidewall twice, just because I think it looks pretty. So that's my first loop. Then I'm going to loop again. And pull it tight. I like having that locked down. I like how it matches the top. Once again, another aesthetic thing. So basically, when I say sidewalls, I mean knots. So I was gonna make these. I'll make this one long video so you guys can watch it, because I think that makes the most sense. So in my mind, there are 4 knots that should be used, and then ignoring ones. So, and then what they each serve, it's kind of a spectrum of functions. So you can either hold the mesh to the inside of the head, which I will show you, or pull the mesh to the outside of the head. And so from innermost to outermost, it is capped with the knots. So pulling the mesh to the innermost side of the head is going to be what's called an anchor knot, as String King calls it. Then goes your normal interlock, which still holds the mesh a little to the inside. Then an SI starts pulling the mesh to the outside, and an SI knot pulls it to the furthest outside. So what I mean by that is, if I want to tie an anchor knot, and the way you do that is you're going to start like you're doing a normal interlock, right? So you're going to go in through the outside, in through the outside, up through the desired mesh hole, and then you see this big loop, you are going to come down. So whereas a normal interlock would come up through this loop, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go down through that loop. Now, what I like to do is pull it kind of tight and then actually pull up on, so you're going to want to tie down this piece coming from the last knot as tight as possible before you do your interlock. So as you can see, I'm not tightening the knot immediately. So if I back up, if I just tighten it like this, it can be kind of loose. But if I really want to get it tight, I actually have to pull up, hold that in place with my thumb, and then pull down. And so as you can see, that piece of mesh is completely on the inside of the sidewall. See that? It is completely on the innermost side of the head. So I love using this knot for wide heads initially, because it can give you a little bit more channel, since the top part doesn't have to be stretched all the way across. But kind of rule of thumb, it's really hard to go straight from this into, especially like a stacked SI, which is completely pulling the mesh on the outside of the head. because one is going to be on the inside, the other one's going to be on the outside, and as you can see, you just have that little flap. So next step, so if we back up, just do a normal interlock. So outside in of the sidewall, up through that sidewall hole, and then instead of coming, you see this loop again, instead of going down through the loop, we're going to come up through the loop. This one you can just pull tight. So as we can see here, this one's actually riding on top of that sidewall a little bit, but still held to the inner side of the head. You know, and if you really pulled it in, you can almost get it all the way on the inside. So that's your normal interlock. Next step would be an SI, or a special interlock. And how you do a special interlock is instead of going through the sidewall first, you're actually going to go down through the mesh hole first. From the inside of the sidewall out. Okay, we're going to leave that loop again that we've just made. So as you can see, down and out. Keep this loop here. Now I'm going to go up through this mesh hole, and instead of going from the inside out of that hole, you are just going to want to keep everything on, how did I mess that up? No, I think I'm doing it right. No, I'm definitely not doing it right. Oh my gosh. Been a little while since I strung an SI. Still, okay, scratch that. You're still going to want to go down through the mesh hole. Want to go from the outside in of the sidewall, not the inside out. So we're going to keep this loop here. Outside in, and then up. And keep everything on the inside. There we go. So now, as you can see, we are starting to pull the mesh to the outside of the head. So here we are almost getting it all the way around on the outside. Okay, and now finally the SI knot, which I picked up from High Strung Lacrosse. I know he didn't invent it, but it is a really cool knot. So you're going to start out like you're doing an SI, go down through, and imagine you're tying a 1 with a knot. So you're going to go from the outside of the mesh hole in, outside of the sidewall in, okay? So I have this little loop, and then I'm going to go around and down through. So if you can see that, I go around and down. So this makes just a little overhand knot like that. Let you guys stare at that for a second. And what you can do is pull it down really tightly so that the 1 is really tight, and then pull down. So if I stopped right now, that would just be a 1 with a knot, right? Pretty straightforward. But what you're going to do is go back up through that mesh hole. So I actually think it's not easier than an SI, but it's easier to see than an SI. You're going to go back up through that mesh hole and now pull it down. So as you can see, it's basically a knot, and look how far to the outside that is pulling the mesh. Look, you can literally see it from the other side of the head. So that is the full gamut of, actually I'll show you guys what a stacked SI with a knot looks like as well, because you guys are asking that. Stacked SIs always pull the mesh all the way to the outside of the head, even more so with a knot. So I don't always recommend using the knot in a stacked SI. So what you're going to want to do is go down through 2 mesh holes, and like I said, treat it like it's just a 2 this time instead of a 1. You're going to want to tie a knot there. So if you looked at it right now, that would just look like a 2 ending in a knot. Now you're going to want to go back up through both of these sidewall holes and pull down once again. So as you can see, stacked SI really pulls it to the outside of the head. And so that's basically your repertoire right there. Ignoring ones. I tend to not use a lot of ones. I tend to only use them after I've made my pocket at the bottom. I really don't understand the point of not having something locked down into the top of the head unless you're using like an Evo X or something that has like 4 stringing holes. Just doesn't quite make sense to me. So that's my knot repertoire. Like I said, you have a spectrum. Knots holding the mesh to the inside of the head versus holding it to the outside of the head. Kind of bookended by knots, actual knots. So you have your anchor knot, then your normal interlock, special interlock, stacked SI with a knot, or not stacked SI, SI with a knot, and then even more so stacked SI with a knot. That's basically what I use. I tend to use ones after I stack just because I want to put the bottom of the mesh exactly where I want it. And so I will always waste a little extra time and sidewall string at the bottom to make sure I've locked down the bottom of the pocket exactly where I want it, because I don't really like the shiftiness of normal pockets. Try to avoid that at all costs. So that's that. I'll do a throat string tutorial eventually. I'll do it with this head. Okay. I'm going to string the sidewalls up on this bad boy, and I will catch you guys after that.